Hello everybody, welcome to Red Toolhouse. On our YouTube channel we talk about all things homesteading and try to implement some of those things in our rural 100 acres in southern West Virginia. Today we're going to talk about electric fence charging. Actually, that's not right. Always freaks out the cameraman, doesn't it? Today we're going to talk about upgrading electric fence, pasture fence for the pigs. And in this situation, here at this nice piece of ironwood here, we have 14 gauge wire coming down. This is a what I consider more permanent fencing. It's along a creek line that goes up the main stream. So it is something that I've put in place for a while and feel that it's going to be a permanent fence. But right here, we actually have three fence lines converging. This line and then this line are both 17 gauge. And they're kind of what I consider a temporary fence situation. Now, they've been up for a couple years now, but I know I want to make changes in these areas. And if you've watched some of our videos in the past, we talk about 17 gauge wire and 14 gauge. 14 gauge is more expensive, a little bit harder to work with, but it pays off in the long run when you are going to have more of a permanent fence fixture. In this situation here, this section is, obviously this T-post is, or this step-in post is loose, but where we cross the creek and we go down that side of the creek, this fence area separates what I call my north pasture from my south pasture. Now this crosses the creek here, it goes down about, I don't know, 50 yards and then crosses the creek again and stays on the south side. The reason why I do that, of course, is I want north pasture and south pasture to both have access to the creek. There's a large hole of water there that south pasture has access to, and further down the creek there's larger holes of water that north pasture has access to. But this is also right over here. Go ahead and point that way, or go that way, Liam, about halfway down before you get to that hole of water. So that way, this area, this low spot in the creek where it's shallow, is actually like a whitetail highway. I'll walk down there. So what we have is, on a regular basis, the white-tailed deer come through here and they hit the hillside. Now there's also tons and tons of white oaks around us, so in the fall this is just inundated with acorns. And so what happens is the deer, they get in here and they get spooked or something gets their attention and they don't see this wire, so they go through it. And I've repaired breaks in this wire. There's more break, it almost looks like barbed wire with all the little breaks and repairs that I've had to make. So it's one of those things, well, I think this is going to be permanent now. I like this setup. So what I'm going to do is come back and do a better job of putting that fence in, and I'm going to go with 14 gauge wire. The 14 gauge wire, of course, is stronger. It resists breakage from the deer. And in fact, I have yet, knock on wood, I've yet to have any fence broken that's 14 gauge. Even though I've seen deer hit it full on, and they just kind of bounce off of it. So I've yet to have that broken. So what we're going to do is start here on this corner, and we're going to replace the 17 gauge, put tensioners in, put some better connectors, and just make sure everything is just better connected. And here comes our testers. Here comes our fence testers. They hear me talking. So we'll put that in, and we'll be able to get this more secure, more permanent. What happens when this comes down, that's why these little suckers are here. They're waiting for this to be down because they want to get over. They like hanging out with the sows for some reason, even though the sows hate them. This is probably the only litter I've ever had that doesn't want to be separate, even though they've got unlimited feed on this side. So we'll get that more secure. Well, the first thing we need to do, of course, is take this 17 gauge down, and I'm going to wind all that up. And I shared this in a previous video where Tom at Hilltop Machine Works made this. So shout out to Hilltop. I'll link to Tom's channel in the description below. But Tom saw what I was doing in the past, using my drill and a stick and a scrap piece of metal to wind up my fence, and he said, as a machinist, I can do much better than that. And he did indeed. So I now have this handy dandy chuckable. So now with the bearing in it, I can wind up my fence accordingly. So let's take all of this loose. down junction here. Okay, so we're just going to cut this off. And the way Tom made this, he made a nice little handy dandy starting hole here somewhere. There it is. Give it a couple wraps to get her started. Helps if you keep it taut. Alright, so now we're going to take our 14 gauge, and again, we've done videos in the past on this, but we're just using a ratchet tensioner. I'm going to get my holes lined up here. And then, of course, what I'll do at the end is I'll hook this up. This is the jumper from the existing 14 gauge, and we'll push this down in and tighten it up once we get our, or crimp it down once we get our tension tightened. I'm sure there's probably better ways to do that. That's how I do it. All right, let's go, wireman. All right, Kimmo, go. Look, if you want to do it like this, turn around, face the way you're going to walk. Put your hands behind you. I think it's much easier from stepping around. Now, do you see where you're going to go? You're going to go, yeah, you're going to go around that tree, and you'll see the step-in post, and there's almost like a little trail you'll follow all the way down through there, okay? Okay, so we've got our 14 gauge wire stretched, put up some new insulators, and one thing I realized is right here, I had a choke down point starting. Again, I had a temporary gate just coming down, temporary wire coming down right behind the camera there and crossing our road that the camera's sitting on. And then it just came right up along this edge of the creek and tied in. This is that three-way junction there. And what I realized is having a choke down point here, my piglets are coming down and enjoying the creek, naturally just walking up the creek and knowing I've got electric here and electric there. It kept squeezing them down, and they kept testing this spot under the creek crossing. Most of this is solid stone, so I can't get a T-post driven down in there. Right now I just got a step-in post in the sand. So I realized that's how, sometimes they're getting out or they're messing that fence up. So what I decided to do was take that choke down point out of there. So I just come off the hill here, so you can see this line coming right down behind the my left, your right, just comes down off the hill, crosses the road, comes across the creek and ties into our new 14 gauge here. So the thing that the camera's obviously not going to pick up is just how much more visible this 14 gauge is. A, it's shiny. Now granted, it will patina over time, but it's just such a thicker wire that the pigs are going to see it more, that hopefully the deer will see it, and they're not taking it on full blast and taking it out there. So tightened up my tensioner, and I think we're ready to throw some power to it and see how it goes. Well, fast forward a couple days, and I wanted, before I wrapped up the video, I wanted to make some comments. I obviously don't wear this when I do fence work, and that is a cat in the pot, yes. But one point I wanted to make is, with doing electric fence wire in large areas, the 17 gauge wire may seem more economical, and it definitely is more economical as far as outlay of cash. But going with a heavier gauge wire, and again, 14 gauge is where I've gone. You can go heavier. You can get into high tensile gauge wire, which I believe may be 12 or 10 gauge. Don't quote me on that. But you can invest in some of that heavier gauge wire, and I think in the long run it's going to pay off for you, as long as you're not moving it around. If you take it down and put it back up a lot, or you decide, hey, I need to get rid of this, I don't want this laid out this way, and you end up rolling that wire up, it becomes too unsightly or has too many bends in it to really stretch out the way you want it to, then you may be wasting money there. But if you're going to put some permanent electric fence in, then I definitely recommend going with that heavier gauge, especially if you have issues like we do with deer and other critters running through the woods. Now, there obviously are other options when it comes to electric fence wire or any type of electric conductor material that you're going to put around your fence. You see the string, the white string that has a lot of visibility to it and has a little small filament of wire in it. I've seen those work really well for smaller paddocks. The thing I do run into a lot is when those break, it's really hard to see where those breaks have happened. So I have a buddy that has a horse farm and he uses those a lot, and that's always his complaint. But then you also have the ribbon wire, which is the wider nylon ribbon, and I believe it has several filaments in, which those are nice because it takes multiple breaks to make that inactive. But the expense is pretty high. So you can imagine if you're going to do like we do and go through the woods and do 2 different pastures of 5 acres, then you're going to require a lot of that ribbon, and that's going to get very expensive. So the single strand wire is usually your most economical way to go, but I strongly recommend going with a heavier gauge, again, unless you're just going to do something temporary. Well, if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Be sure to check out our website, redtoolhouse.com, and sign up for our email newsletter. We send emails out every once in a while. I know I'm running a little behind on my emails. I haven't done one in a while. I'm going to try to do one this week, which is this the week I'm releasing this video or the week I'm recording the video? Anyway, hopefully there'll be one soon. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it. All right, take care, everybody.